if we start to pay attention to how much time we waste, then we are so much more efficient and we will have hours in the day. And the problem is when we feel stress, we're looking at least for a quick distraction. So we'll go to social media, we'll do these things that suck time, and we don't realize we're just actually having a stress response.
Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. I am so excited for today's guest. We actually have a really long bio here. Like, this is a first for the Tom Ferry Podcast Experience. But today's guest is really a woman of just multiple titles. Gabrielle Reece, a beach volleyball legend, a champion both on and off the courts and of course in the sand. She's the first female spokeswoman for Nike, which is huge, and we want to get into that as well. And her Air GR2 shoes outsold Air Jordan, which is fantastic. Gabby's also been a model, right, who has graced the covers of Elle magazine, Life magazine, Shape, and multiple others. She's been a television host, and it doesn't end there, right? She's also a New York Times bestselling author. She's married. She has a beautiful family. And today, with her husband, she's the co-founder of XPT Experience, which is a strength and conditioning training program, which I just downloaded the app and this morning was doing the anxious breathing exercise preparing for this interview. So Gabby, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Who did you do your breathing with?
I actually did it by myself, right? So
Who was your guide though? Was it PJ or Mark or me, or who was it?
It was a female voice. Hold
Okay.
on. Let me pull it up really fast here. I actually have it loaded, ready to go.
Hello and welcome to Breathing Phrases.
Oh, I think it's Lindsay. Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Interesting. Great.
So I know we're going to get into this app, but there's so many things to discuss today.
Mhm.
I was doing my homework and I was listening to a couple different podcasts with you, listening to a couple different interviews. Would you mind, just for context, for maybe the people that don't understand your backstory and how you got here, going back to like the very beginning, would you share that story, like moving to California, and take us all the way through the journey?
Yeah. So you want me sort of after college part of the journey?
I want from like 2 years old, leaving California. I want to go way back.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, so I'll try to really condense it quickly.
Sure.
My parents, I think, my father passed away when I was 5, and my mother would never admit to it, but I think they had like a flingy type of relationship. And out of that, I arrived. They didn't really stay together very long. My father's from Trinidad. My mother's from New York. They met in California. Go figure, 1969, what was going on. So then I lived with my mother, who trained dolphins in a circus in Mexico, and I got whooping cough there. And so she had a neighborhood friend. She was quite young, maybe 22-ish, 20, maybe 23 by then. Anyway, so then this couple that either chose or decided not to have children, he had just come back from Vietnam. It was like 1972. They took care of me in Long Island, New York for about 5 years. Then my mother in that time remarried, and my stepfather's from Puerto Rico, and we moved down there, and then I ended up then growing up in the Virgin Islands until I was 15. And so in 11th grade, I was moved to Florida because, what's great about living on islands is like you have this great lifestyle, you're grounded. However, if it's sort of a critical age, it can go wrong pretty fast. Yeah. And so I was pulled out of there, and then I went to St. Petersburg, Florida, and I got involved with athletics there. I had dabbled a bit in volleyball but prior to that, but not so serious there. And mind you, I was 6'3" by the time I moved there, so that was helpful. And I fell into sports, basketball and volleyball. Long story short, I ended up getting offers for both and chose volleyball and chose Florida State. Graduated at 17, went to Florida State on a scholarship. And then that summer, when I was 18, I started modeling in New York because I needed to pay my bills besides the scholarship. And then I did the dual role for all the 3 years. My coach helped me figure out how to do that. I actually ended up paying to play. I gave up my scholarship after my sophomore year. And then I moved to Miami after college. I got introduced to beach volleyball. And after about a year and a half, someone said, oh, you should move to California and be a professional. So here I am back in California in 92. And from there, I just was very, as we say, very good timing, So Nike and the 4-person tour and doubles. And that was in 92. And then I met my husband in 95. And here I am. And I should say, because again, I don't want to bore people with like the long story of it, is because beach volleyball is so small of a platform, and I think this is an important part of my story, I've always done a lot of things. So once I could be a professional athlete, I actually stopped modeling per se and tried to parlay all the storytelling into me, the person, the athlete. When I was younger, I was a girl for hire, and that was great, and it was a great way to make a living. But because the platform was so small, it actually forced me to hustle. So I was doing TV and I was doing other things simultaneously to being a professional volleyball player, because I think intuitively I knew and understood there was a lot of limitations. And so I better, while I was in that time of my life, develop other skill sets, things that I was naturally attracted to, like doing television or writing or things like that. So I think oftentimes people will say, oh, how did you know to, do all these things? And the truth of the matter is, it's not that I could see so far ahead. It's just the fact that I was in a very small sport. So I knew I was going to have to kind of support that foundation with other things.
Yes. I mean, so many people can relate to that, because even the story today is a culture of side hustles, extra work, building your brand, which you were so on point with. There's like 100 things I want to unpack on this, but the one question that I really wanted to go into this morning, after I literally could have told that story. I listened to an interview you did where you shared sort of your life's journey, and Gabby, so many people get wrapped up in the way that they were raised or the circumstances of the moment or their time in life. And, they either make themselves the hero or they make themselves the victim. And I'm curious, like for you, how did you find that sort of heroism to go out and do what you've done? And then what advice do you have for the person that's maybe listening thinking, I kind of got stuck in my past?
I think it's a really interesting and important conversation to have all the time, because even though, let's say, for example, I wasn't paralyzed by my past to keep me from doing things, there were attributes that developed, though, that I still contend with today, that I'm trying to refine, that are internal traits. So, for example, I think my survival, my drive to survive was so powerful that it actually overrode this idea of being a victim. I think I was hardwired to be like, no one's going to do it. I have to go do it. And I think there's something to be said. I said a lot of things come out of a chip on your shoulder and fear and things like that. But then I think we get to a place in life where we have to actually celebrate what gifts and talents we have and what contribution we want to make. So if there was somebody sitting there saying, well, I've had a very hard past, or people have not been particularly kind to me, things like that, I would say a couple of things. I would say that not only is that over, but what high cards, what aces do you have in your deck? And start to drill down and hone in on that. And also, how do you want to contribute to the world that you live in? Because one thing I know is you can accumulate wealth, or you could accumulate, notoriety, or all of these things. But really, at the end of the day, what makes us feel good is when we contribute to the world that we live in, and in some way offer our talent to the tribe, if you know what I mean. And maybe the tribe is bigger. It's not 100 people, but it's sort of getting in touch with that. And I also think that, I don't want to say forgiveness, but there's something to be said for, nobody did it to you. People did the best they could at that time. Maybe some of them are actually mentally ill. Like some of us could be born to people that are mentally ill, or had a mentally ill uncle who, came to the house and was inappropriate, right? And so in a way, it's about how do we shift how we look at things and say, okay, how do I go from here? It doesn't mean it's easy. And like I said, even for me, I sometimes walk around like my feet are on fire. And I worry like about the future and things that are, it's sort of an unnecessary trait now. And I'm always looking for ways to refine that within myself. And so it never goes away. Even for people who have great childhoods, we're always going to be working on something. I think it's the human plight. So it's not about saying, well, I'm working on this, and once I'm done working on this, I can participate. Get going, participate, and then just keep working. You know, I call it, sort of polishing the stone. And be honest with yourself. Like, I feel afraid. I'm angry. I don't know how to have fun. I don't know how to be successful. I don't know how to receive winning. All of these things are okay to say.
And do you believe, and I certainly do you believe we should look in the mirror and vocalize that, like own that, or is it more of an interpersonal, introspective moment?
I mean, certainly I think it can be introspective, but I find it the best to be able to be said to somebody that you're close enough to, that you can trust, that it's not, you don't become concerned that you've given this very delicate information to, and they're not also going to try to say to you, well, I mean, but everything's so good, you should be grateful. You should be grateful, but you should have the space to say, and I'm super anxious, or I am afraid, or I doubt myself, or I don't think I deserve it, or whatever our stories are that we tell ourselves. Because I feel like just the ability to put it out in front of us and to have someone else go, okay. I also think it minimizes the impact, and we realize it's not awful that we feel those things. It's probably normal, but now what are we going to do about it? And so I think it's a dual. I think it's having that internal conversation to really understand what you're feeling if it keeps showing up, and then finding a safe place to verbalize it. But then there's another step beyond that, which is to take action. I think a lot of people get to number 2 even, and they even might go to therapy. But I think at some point we have to begin to create new habits and new practices and do things that make us uncomfortable, because that's how we sort of get through and get to the next.
Have you met David Goggins?
I haven't. I've only, followed his, him on social media, or heard him on podcasts and things like that. I wonder what David Goggins is running from, though. That's what I want to ask David Goggins. I'm joking, but
I think that's so I've interviewed him twice. I've worked with him a couple times.
He's amazing.
Yeah, he worked with my son, who's a tennis player, for 3 hours backstage before he went on stage. And I mean, basically my son got a 3-hour, like just layout session with David Goggins. And he said to me afterwards, thanks. Because David's intense, but so much of what you're saying is his conversation around the accountability mirror. You've got to face it. Like, if you're overweight, you're overweight. You got to look yourself in the mirror and say, you're fat, now do something about it.
Yeah.
Right? So, I think you said that perfectly. I want to ask you this question. People would look at someone like yourself and say, I mean, my goodness, like, look at all of the success. But did you ever have any roadblocks that you faced? And if so, like, what were your steps for overcoming it?
Well, I think we've all heard this many times, but I know it to be true. We are all our own worst enemy. And even someone like myself, where I might still do something and go for it and even work really hard at something, inside I am still my own worst enemy. And I think certainly I had roadblocks, but I will say this: I was involved in activities that were very complementary to a female. Mm-hmm. I was in a sport, which volleyball is a highly dominated feminine female sport. So we were in ways treated actually in an elevated way over the men. And if you want to talk about fashion, I mean, that is a woman's deal. The male models are, kind of props, if you will. So I think my obstacles have been more like this: starting a new business, the successes and failures of those, staying in those businesses either too long, spending too much money in them, they were not right, taking the lessons and going on to the next. Because ultimately I've always been an entrepreneur. right? I'm a freelance person. So day to day, you have obstacles because you're forging the path. I think what it is you keep drilling down on, why am I doing this? Why am I really, really doing this? Do I believe in this? Do I feel proud of this? Is this time that is worth not being either with my family or doing something positive for myself? Am I willing to take, the blows in order to get to the other side of this? Because a lot of times you'll be like, well, this isn't even worth it, right? And then also once you do it enough, I think there's sort of a rhythm and a pattern to things. So like when I was joking earlier about business, where we then learn how to not only align with people that are very good at what they do, but also their sort of moral or philosophical compass is lined up. So if we get further down the road in business, there's not going to be that conflict. It's also, and recognizing and appreciating sort of teammates, if you will, in work that are good at what they do, and deferring to them in their space and having that trust and things like that. So I think it's also about having enough failures that you get those lessons that you take into the next and make it smooth. But yeah, I think coming from sports, I always joke, like when you go to practice, you work on what you're not good at and you get comfortable with that. And that is, I think when you can do that in your life, hey, I'm not good at this, or this is not working, we're going to work on this, not always looking for, oh, that was amazing. It's like, that's not what's going to get you there. So it's really sort of looking at, what needs to get done, what's the plan for that, a strategy, and then also going, oh, you know what, I'm not doing so good over here, I got to work on this.
Everything you just said there is so battle tested as an entrepreneur. I've been in this game for 30 plus years. I've started 17 companies. I'm invested in 57. And I actually want to take that snippet and basically send it to every CEO of all the startup companies we've invested in, because you're completely on point. But do you believe that sports and the fact that we lose so often in sports actually makes us not comfortable with losing, but more understanding of you don't always win?
Well, the losing is part of the winning. It's like life, the heart, like you discussed your wife going through through cancer.
Yeah.
The hard is a part of the joy, is a part of the magic, is a part of the elation. It's like, and I think if we look at life that way, the losing is part of the winning, the sadness is part of the great deep, love and joy that we can experience and not freak out. And it doesn't mean we can't feel sad, or we can't be like, wow, I've got my ass kicked today in business and I lost. But it's sort of saying, and this too is a part of the formula.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever heard the concept of the alter ego?
I think I have, but I just so I'm clear.
Well, just most athletes that I meet, a friend of mine who's a wonderful author who's been working with athletes, like professional athletes, for the last 2.5 decades, writes this book on the alter ego. And the concept is that most athletes, most performers will basically create in their mind a persona that goes out on stage and operates at this super level when maybe they feel emotionally they couldn't, until those two eventually intercede or connect. So when I say that to you, can you think of an alter ego that perhaps you created, either it was for business or for sports or even for being a parent?
Oh yeah. I'll be honest with you. If I could be a producer and a working person behind, oddly, you wouldn't realize it. No, seeing me, I'm not particularly in need of a lot of outside attention. But for whatever reason, I've always been comfortable communicating in front of lots of people and things like that. But this is what I did. Let's just take fashion for an example. I didn't want to stand there in heels and a dress and do that. But I also would go, okay, what's the goal and what's my job? And so I'm going to do that. I'm going to focus on that. I'm not going to focus on that this is not really so much how I am and it makes me uncomfortable. I'm going to focus on my role is to do a certain job and what do I need to do that. And conversely, it was the same with sports. I'm not naturally, I'm probably competitive, but I would sort of up certain parts of my personality. So even, for example, today I train with Laird, and I don't normally, I train near him, but I don't train with him. It's like, wouldn't do it to yourself. And he gave us these drills, and instantly I became a 17-year-old boy. Because I was saying to create that energy to get it done, I had to be a little belligerent, and I had to have something to push against inside myself. Where if I was like his wife or like, somebody's mom, it's like, oh, how many were doing 50? No, instead of it was like, I'm like a 17-year-old who's like, okay, like a little bit obnoxious. And so I think within that, absolutely, I think being a boss, I have another side that you create this alter ego, to your point, where I have to drop off information that's uncomfortable. As a female, I don't want to do it emotionally. I want to do it objectively as that person in that role. And I've definitely had to learn that language and create that person. So absolutely, you amplify. That's what it is, maybe, is amplifying different parts of your personality. I think when we do it and it isn't us, that's where we get into trouble.
Yes. Yes.
I have friends that are like very well known and big performers, like arena type things, singer. The problem is it is such a part of them, but also in some ways it's so far. And I think what's tricky in those dynamics is like the drop come down, and there's so much output, and then you're getting too much an unnatural amount of attention that it almost can make you you're bummed.
100%.
So it's like, that's the only one I'm so grateful I don't have to manage that, because you see those people and I'm like, I don't know how you recover from that kind of attention and light and heat. To like everyday minutia, unsexiness, take the garbage out. Your chick wants to communicate with you, and you're like, why don't I just go in front of 75,000 people and just they love me? So that's the only time I've seen where they go too far almost.
Yeah, that's a really, it's a fascinating insight. I'll send you a copy of this book. He talks a lot about Beyonce creating Sasha Fierce.
Yeah.
Kobe Bryant creating the Black Mamba.
Yeah.
Right? And at least when he talked about Sasha Fierce and Beyonce, he said like she would put on the Sasha Fierce outfit, so when she was done, she could take that off, set it over there, and go be Beyonce again.
Yeah.
And so she was able to, at least the way he describes it in the book, I've not met her and had this conversation, but he said that she was able to like take it off. And I mean,
that's smart.
Yeah, I'm a performer, so I know what it's like to be in front of 6,000 people in an audience and then go home and my wife's like, take the freaking trash out. You know what I mean? And I learned like, take the trash out.
And if you can like almost see the beauty in that duality, because I always say life always has tension.
Yeah.
Then that's where you hit the sweet spot, because then you're just like, isn't that funny? Like yesterday, everyone was kissing my ass and I was up on stage, and now I'm walking outside and I hope a raccoon's not here because I'm going to throw my rubbish out. It's like, I feel like when we can sort of really enjoy that,
yes,
then I think it's in our favor.
No doubt. No doubt. So let's go back to business for a second. There was something that I read and repeatedly heard in podcasts and others where you've done like a really exceptional job, basically, for lack of a better way to describe it, controlling your brand, right? Whether it was with Nike or in your volleyball career, certainly your modeling career, television. Where did that come from, and what insight would you share? Because my tribe, the people that are listening to this, they're all entrepreneurs, they're salespeople, they skew mostly 54% female. And I say like, my perfect customer is 55, she's married a husband, she raised another one, she's got kids, she's a baller in her business, and yet they all struggle with the same thing, like controlling their brand as they scale trust in their business. So just kind of thoughts on where did that come from for you, and then what are your tips to do it?
That's an interesting question, because I will say there's sort of two parts of that come to my mind right away, which is one, at 18 working in fashion and then playing ball, like I was even getting pressure to not play volleyball in college. And I was like, oh, that's not me though.
Yeah.
Like me, is fashion is an awesome opportunity, and I know what I see it for what it is. I know my limitations within that. That's the other thing, is because of my size, there was real limitations.
Sure.
And volleyball was like, that was me, you know, kind of working hard and being on a team and all these things. So managing, quote, a brand, I always think it's strange. Like Brand Jordan is a brand, and every new athlete now talks about their brand, but they don't really have a brand. Controlling yourself is easy. So if you say, hey, Gabby, do you want to endorse this product that you would never use in your life? Pretty easy to say, that's not me.
Yeah.
So I've just always, if you're talking about that, said, is that me? Is that a real representation of me? Would I use that? Do I feel proud if I ran into you on the street and you go, I bought that thing because of you? So I think I always had that compass, and that comes from growing up on an island and just really having it early, being true to thine own self. Now, let's say, for example, an XPT or Laird Superfood, what I've learned now, if we're going to talk about entrepreneurs, is first of all, the culture. If you want to talk about really protecting your brand first, you have to figure out what is your internal culture. And I've really learned, like I knew this and we've drilled down on it, but I've really learned this from our CEO at Laird Superfood, where, I mean, top to bottom, it's essential, that culture. Yes. Then that bleeds out. And you know, the notion of going back to why are we doing this? And everybody, you know, writes their mission statement, and it's okay, it's all pie in the sky, and, you know, to create for the world and all this stuff. But I think you have to be constantly in touch with, why am I doing this? If I wasn't going to make money from this, why would I be doing this? What do I want to offer people? What do I want to get? And keep reinforcing that. But for the people who are entrepreneurs and they're the head, first they've got to be in charge of their culture. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, don't go like, well, this time we'll do this because it'll be good and we'll jump ahead 3 steps. Yeah, but if you don't really believe in that, or you don't really like those people or that brand that you're going to line up with, it might be worth it just to go a little slower, to understand that when you get it lined up and it's right, it goes faster in the end, period. It just will. I always call it the exponential. Like, it's slow, but then, man, if it's all buttoned up and it's tight and you're sure, boom.
Yep.
And, but is it harder? Yes. Do you have to have more faith? You do. But that's what makes it so sweet and so, such an incredible experience when you get all those things to click. And by the way, if someone's on their first round, and you know this from all the businesses you've been involved with, this may not be the one. And that's just part of it too. Work like it is and see what happens.
I love it. There was so much. I'm just looking at my team who's all taking notes as we're doing this interview. There were so many points inside of that conversation. All right, I'm gonna switch gears because I want to talk about something that is meaningful for my tribe: salespeople, entrepreneurs, business leaders, startups. You know, you're an athlete, you're an entrepreneur, you're a mom, right? You're a business owner of multiple businesses. I guess my question is, how do you manage it all? Like, what's your process for keeping it all together? And I mean, the whole enchilada, your entire life.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you like the superficial elements first, because they're easy.
Yeah.
In a day and age where everybody puts everything on their phones and their computers, I actually still write things down. I have a very large notebook, because imagine I'm managing my work, our businesses, Laird's work. So Laird's interviews, my interviews, appearances, travel, you know, phone conferences, board meetings, and then children. So I think first of all is writing everything down in an old-fashioned way, because then it helps, I can see it, and also managing it in the way of like how it's all connected. Because if I load you up Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then the following Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm not seeing how it's all rolling out. So it's also about kind of creating flow. Yeah. Where you go, hey man, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you're jammed up beyond. So if I have the ability to slide and move and make it a little lighter for 3 days and then go, okay, back in. So I do that. And again, that's the superficial.
But
Go
stop,
ahead.
stop for a second. Two things. First, someone just walked through the
I
door.
think it was
behind you.
Laird. He's coming in because he's in between things and leaving.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
hysterical. Like my whole team was like, there's a ghost opening the door right now.
Yeah, it's Laird or the
But-
dog.
Yeah, but really what you just said there, I think is so, I know you say it's superficial, but I think for my listeners to hear that there is a natural flow and energy. Like, are you good for 3 days of grinding and then giving yourself a break, right? But what I see oftentimes is they don't grind, they do just little spurts and it takes them 7, 8, or 30 days in a row, but they don't produce any results. They don't really go hard for a couple days. So
Yeah.
unpack that a little more.
Yeah. I think okay, I'll give you an example. Let's say we're taking meetings, and I'm going to use myself as an example, as a female. I will be dressed for a meeting. I will probably put mascara on for a meeting and be ready. So why would I not go to 3 or 4 or 5 meetings when I've geared up, I've maybe gotten the kids dialed because I have the one, and then I know, okay, I have a gap. I can be more of a mom tomorrow. I can pick up and drop off or pick up. So I think it's also, when I talk about that, it's the flow, because in my case, like a lot of people, you're a lot of things. And even down to this, I will look at windows, because Laird and I have because I do manage his schedule, I can see where there's opportunities actually even for us to intersect and be like, okay, well, if he's going east and I'm going the other direction west, for 3 or 4 days in a row, or whatever that looks like, or a week or something, I'm very clear that what needs to happen is somewhere in there has to be, we've got to be a couple. And certainly the kids take that priority. So maybe I blow it. I can't take Brody to one practice, but I can take her to the practice 2 days later. So that's why it's like, if you're in the momentum, stack it. And if you then can say, all right, I get a moment to keep putting the chips into the other elements of my life, whether it's my family, my self-care. People forget this, especially the women.
Mm-hmm.
My friend Kenny Kane talks about, like, you have buckets, like it's work, it's self-care and family, and you only have so many chips, like where are you putting them? So if you're loading up on the work, then it's going to be time to redistribute at some point. And so I think this is really important. And also, if we start to pay attention to how much time we waste, then we are so much more efficient and we will have hours in the day. And the problem is, when we feel stress, we're looking at least for a quick distraction. So we'll go to social media, we'll do these things that suck time, and we don't realize we're just actually having a stress response.
Yeah.
Right? We're like, oh, I feel overloaded. I just need a different source of stimuli. And so when we can start to notice and say, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to get up, I'm going to walk around, drink some water, come down, hammer it down, so that actually I'm going to finish work earlier today at 4, not at 6:30, because I've wasted time, and utilize that time either for myself or my family, but really getting on top of the distractions. Because in no time in life has it been easier to get stuff done, and also more to to kind of decipher through. So I mean, that's how I manage it, and I'm always conscious of my quote unquote real life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know if that goes sideways, I'm gonna have a real problem. And so I'm not going to wait for, Laird to be like, oh, you've been ignoring me, or my kids to kind of be like, can you ramp up the mom role, to sort of, to acknowledge that. However, I will say this, it also is a luxury, right? This is part of saying, I think about my business 24 hours a day. I take it home with me. I'll work on a Saturday or Sunday. That is also a luxury given to me, versus if someone, let's say, is going to an office, they've got to manage it differently.
Mm-hmm.
So it's also about acknowledging that. But if you're an entrepreneur, you have to bust your own ass and put a system in place so that you can be successful, and know where you're weak, or know where you could unravel or get distracted, and fortify that so that you don't get yourself into trouble.
Yeah. There was a lot there, guys. I'm looking at my team, they're over there like nodding. Yes. So Gabby, there's a lot of things about what you do and how you operate that impressed me just doing my research. One of the things that I picked up on, and I think you just nailed it, is you're the face and your husband's also the face, right? But you run the back end. And there's not many people that can be the face of a business and a brand and run the back end. Then you take the complexity of also being a wife and a friend and a mom. Like, first of all, maybe just shed some other light on, if you don't mind. I know you just shared a lot, but a lot of my customers, they work in husband and wife teams, business partnerships. And one is, I kind of describe it as the face, like who's out meeting clients and going on appointments and like they're out and about. And of course, the one in the back who's managing the transactions, dealing with the money, it's kind of like the minutia and the grind versus fun and joy is the way they describe it. Yeah. What advice do you have in dealing with another crazy face for all those people that I love that run the back end?
I'm first of all, it's like passing in volleyball. It's very unglamorous, but nothing happens unless you have a good passer, and all the hitters get all the credit. But you can't start one thing without that. So I think first of all, it's kind of. I'll give you an example. When I had my daughters, I was the one who got pregnant. I was the one who could nurse, and Laird couldn't. Right. So he second day, I have one of the babies, and he's off surfing because he can't. And I was thinking, what my contribution is and what I'm doing is so very different than what he is able to do. And I'm sure of this. It's my choice to choose this. So if you choose to be the back end person, be clear that you have chosen this, because you can't resent the other person that either they have a natural skill set that they can go out there and they got shiny and, they're good conversationalists and they can, maybe they're more of a salesman and they can close deals and things like that. It's being very clear first why you're doing it, the role that you're playing. If would you want to be in the front? I think it's sometimes when you go like that, it's like, do you want to be that person? And most times, most people doing the back end would be like, yeah, no, I don't. So you have a different role. And how do you make that role work for yourself? Because if we're comparing, you're not even comparing the same thing. And kind of being clear that it's probably more stressful because you have more information than the front end person. You know what's coming in, you know what's going out, you know where the problems are, you know that the shipping thing didn't work, and you just sort of have more information. And it's about saying, yes, but this is the job that I feel comfortable with, that I chose, so I'm going to kick its ass. And also within it, not just have it keep coming at me, but again, how do I create my skill set that I manage it in a way that works well for me? Because you can't just keep getting crushed by things. You have to go, okay, let me figure this out and gain some perspective. And also even things like systems. I'm a believer in systems. Even if it's someone who works with you and you're the back end person and they're going to give you a bunch of information, send you emails. It's like, listen, don't send me 3-page emails. Don't leave me 2.5-minute voicemails. Say you need to speak to me. Because if that's going to create stress for you, then figure it out. It's on you to figure that out and say, okay, rather than the 3-page email, say, do you have 15 minutes? Say, I'm going to come in your office or call you on the phone and let's just go through a few things. Perfect. Because then in a way, you're always circling the bowl and you're not getting anything really done, but a bunch of stuff is getting thrown at you. And so I think it's also enjoying. There's an art and a joy to being behind that being in front is not. So where do you start to really appreciate those things?
Mm-hmm. That was a killer answer, by the way. Let's talk about, let's stay in this conversation of maybe just teamwork, right? You think about volleyball, fast action, 4 different roles, running plays that work. What have you found to be some of the better hacks in working with your multiple teams to keep everybody in sync and running plays that work and doing what works?
Well, listen, it's about having the right type of connection, because it's sort of I'll give you an example. I'm very close to certain teammates on the Laird Superfood all the way through the executive roles, not as much on XPT. However, my point person and one of my co-founders is my point person. and there's nobody closer to me than her. So it's about having, for me personally, we're clear that we're on the same page, and actually it's about paying attention. I don't just like how I'm paying attention. I'm watching things. I'm doing the extra to look, and even to see things like what posts are going up and how does that look. And if something seems a little off, not waiting for it to bounce and go crazy and then you're freaking out, but to go, hey, can we get on a call and just talk about this? And so I think I am more impactful because I relinquish the control to the people who say, this is what I'm going to be doing. This is my job. And I say, great, I trust you. And this is your job. So that when I say I need to talk about something, it's impactful. You know, it's not like I'm trying to, be a control freak, because that's unproductive. We're only one person with so many hours in a day. That's dumb. And you're never going to expand and really grow if you don't know how to get people that you can say, like, you're my other half and that's what you do, and great. But you got to pay attention. You have to make sure that thing is staying in the tracks. And if it kind of goes wonk a little bit, you just have to say, hey, I noticed this. Can we talk about it?
Yeah. you have such a calm demeanor, and a lot of the people that are listening right now, especially some of the faces of these businesses, they're emotional, they're expressive. It's what makes
they're artists.
Yeah, it's what makes them so special as a salesperson. And, the problem is then they come back to their team, and it's like the old joke of seagull management. They fly in and they shit, and then they fly away.
Yeah.
Everything about what you were saying, I'm hoping that all my team leaders and faces are listening to this, because it is just better to call and say, hey, I was just, Courtney, I was just looking at something we posted on, Instagram. Like, let's have a conversation about that. Let's go, tell me what the strategy was. Like, it's such a calm approach.
Yes.
Were you always that way, or did you get some mentorship or some coaching along the way? Like, where did that come from?
I think it's a combination. I think playing sports, you have to process things in real time very quickly. And so there's a time where you're like, this needs to be switched right now. Mm-hmm. Like, we don't have a day or 30 minutes. We need to switch it now.
Yeah.
And then there's times where it's like, that overall wasn't working. So when we go to practice tomorrow, we're just going to kind of review it and talk about it. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's also not being hysterical or over dramatic, but also knowing, no, we need to fix this right now. So I think it's gear shifting, and also it is a natural part of my personality, which also works against me. Sometimes I'm too analytical and probably not emotional enough. Like, I even have gotten to the point where I'll be like, that might make me angry. I have to think about that. Do I feel angry? It's like, and so sometimes you have to be of your spirit and your heart too. Because this is all about instincts.
Yes.
If you really talk about being an entrepreneur, right? It's so much of it is instincts and passion and all of these things. So you don't want to get so stuck up in here that you kill that part too. So that's the part I always am wrestling with.
Mm-hmm. I love it. So let's stay on the sort of conversation of like teams, but in this case, your spouse, right?
Uh-huh.
So you and Laird have launched multiple companies,
Uh-huh.
which I want to talk about today. What is it like, and maybe your best hacks for working with your spouse, working on projects together? Like, how do you guys make it work? Because you've done a lot together. How do you guys do it?
I'll use us and a friend of mine as an example. I have a friend who's doing a business with her husband. And so, for example, she'll say, they've decided what the roles are, right? But then sometimes she'll check on his roles, or he'll have opinions on her roles. And I can see where that creates friction, right? Yeah. So I think the good thing about Laird and I is all the things I manage, actually Laird is not only trusts me, but he's just simply not interested in. And the other thing is I'm very clear about what Laird's strengths are and the ways to support him. Like, part of my role, not only in business, but as Laird's wife, is to go, who is this person, and in what best ways do I support them and the missions that they are either verbally or non-verbally expressing that they want to accomplish. Because I think when you're in a partnership, if you can and I'm going to go on a limb and say I think it's sort of like a woman does it more for a man, where like, for example, Laird can say to me, I love you, I believe in you, I will protect you, I cherish you. That gives me power to go out in the world and crush. For, I think what I have found in our dynamic, if I'm like, I respect you, I believe, I will assist you, that helps Laird come to his full best self. Now, if I try to tell Laird what to do, for example, that will inevitably not work. So what I have found works well with us, because you're talking about a very strong personality, and that's why he's good at what he does. Again, it goes back to that tension. Yep. We can't want the one like, wow, he has so many great ideas and he's so innovative. And every time someone says he can't do it, he seems to be able to do it. And then think, oh, just be fair, balanced, and sit on the couch. It's like, no, you have a contrarian, you have somebody who, like you say, you should go left. They just go to right as like the reaction. And not to mention, nobody likes to be told what to do. And nobody in a relationship wants their mother or father, right? I'm Laird's partner. I'm not his mom. So I think once you can start to really understand the nuance. So for example, he trusts me. So if I say, hey, you have a meeting at 3, cool, he's ready to go. I will say that I may not tell him too far in advance, because he doesn't like to feel, he has a weird sensitivity to feeling too scheduled. So I know when to communicate that to him. And then also there's always boundaries. So I'm going to be cool. And if he's, you know, he jokes if he has to go on public speaking things like, oh, I don't surf anymore, I just talk about it. And I'm like, it's 2 days. But I don't say anything. I just think, yes, but that's what makes Laird Laird, is his genuine passion for surfing is always more important than going, having people go, Laird, you're great, and here's a check. That's what I love about him. So I think when you're in these partnerships, define the roles, try to speak the language that's the most impactful, not always what you're feeling. You have to manage that and be like, I'm here to execute. We're in a business dynamic. And even like, you know, like the other day, Laird said something to me in a way, and I go, hey, I don't dig the way that you said that to me. And so please don't. And I walked away. Like, not a big thing. And it was a work thing. And it wasn't like, I can't believe you talked to me that way. And, you know, it's like, no, we're in work.
Yeah.
But, and it's also always remembering you're a team. You know, I learned at Laird Superfood too, like, healthy conflict is good. It pushes the situation ahead and up. Respectful conflict makes, if you have everybody agreeing, no business is going to be successful. And I think if you can get baseline languages that are always steeped in love and respect, it creates a real opportunity for people to push each other in a positive way. And always be reminded, you are on the same team. And if you all win, but somehow they got more credit, does it really matter? It's like, just let's accomplish the mission. And and sorry to the men, I think it's easier for women to do this than men. I think men, like, it's like, it was my idea. It's like, okay, congratulations. But I think there's something to be said for, cool, now we can really continue to grow and expand. So if the mission is attention, that's pretty short-sighted. So the language is important. And again, if things are getting wonky, you just go, hey, let's have a real work conversation, not a personal conversation. And those are different.
It's very apparent why you two were able to work the way you do. Just the rules that you guys have established for yourself, whether it's unintentional or just battle tested. So I think there's gonna be a lot of people that are gonna listen to that segment like over and over and over.
I want to say one other thing too that's important about that, which is certainly I've had practice, so I didn't just arrive at this. But I'm going to tell you another dynamic on why it really also works. And it's called reverence. Both Laird and I are just afraid of each other just enough in a good, healthy way that we sort of go out of our way not to carelessly poke one another.
Yeah.
And that's important, because I think people sometimes create these systems where they go like, oh, well, did you do that? You know, it's like, you know, in a way, the goal would be for me is to be my best self. It's like a coach I've had. The best coaches are the best people. And the athletes look at them and they think, man, the win and the loss, the this and the that person, their character is such that no matter what, they're taking the high line. And I think that that's another very important thing where, let's say, for example, Laird chooses to be not his best self, or I do that, the other one stays high. Because then what it inevitably does is creates a dynamic where the other person goes, ugh, I really blew that. And I got to go back up. And so I think when people talk about that, and I always say the best way you can do that and create that in your environment, your work environment, if you're the boss, you have to be that. And that really is helpful. And I did learn that from great coaches.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Just stay high in the face of it all. So it's like,
stay high.
Yeah. I can hear my mentor always saying, when conflict presents itself, always take the high road.
Yep.
Right? Always take the high road. So let's go a totally different direction for a second.
Okay.
Obviously, one could say that you two are like the most fit couple on the planet. And yeah, I know. First of all, I hope that every person listening on the audio takes the time to go back and watch Gabby's facial expressions when I say these things, or just even your comments about when you go into your husband mode. It's hysterical. But listen, so I'm turning 50 next August, right? And I train like crazy and I love it. And it's become like it's a passion, right, for me. And yet I notice like training in my 30s is different than training in my 40s. And now, looking at my 50s, I'm just curious, like, what advice do you have for the men and women that are out there that are, they want to get back into training, right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe they're training and they're not getting the results that they want. What advice do you have? And I know that's a huge question. Yeah,
sure. Well, okay, let's look at the basics first. Mm-hmm. Most of the people are not getting enough sleep. So let's just start there. This is something that we can all do. Turn our devices off, get to sleep. And it isn't like, well, I went to bed at midnight and I got 8 hours. Go to bed. And I know it's very hard, especially if you have small children, because then you go, well, I have only 1 hour to myself in the day, and they go to bed at 7:30 or whatever. Try to get to bed, first of all, because the only time we really recover is during sleep. Mm-hmm. Again, these are basic things that we can do all the time. Nose breathe all day long, unless you're on a track. If you're doing sprints, you're allowed to dump some CO2 and mouth breathe. Otherwise, when you're sitting at your desk or everything you're doing needs to be slow, deep nose breathing. So if you could get to a cadence of 7 seconds in, 7 seconds out, maybe 5 to 6 full breaths a minute, because less is actually better. This will improve your overall sort of sense of well-being and oxygenate your system. So a lot of us are in chronic inflammation. If we can oxygenate our system, this will help. And sort of notice, I think, first, and I can get into the movement stuff later. Am I on the treadmill of, I ate lunch at my desk and I worked 16 hours, and all these badges of honor and credibility that we wear that really are not good for us, kind of rejiggering and saying, I'm a priority, my life's a priority, the people in my life are a priority. And yes, we all have to work. I get it. But I think sometimes when we feel less stress, because let's just take a parent or a partner. We carry a lot of stress and guilt when we know that we're not tending to those gardens. We just do. It makes us stressed out inside. We feel it. And so I think what people don't realize is, if you said to me, Cheetos and meditation, I would say way better than alfalfa sprouts and high rev stress, because it is still the worst thing. Okay. And I think with aging, we just have that accumulation, right? We have the accumulation of bad patterns, sitting too much, breathing the wrong way, too much stress for over too many weeks and too many years. So aging is a lot of things. Part of why we don't feel good is because we now have this accumulation. Not to mention that we've sold ourselves on the fact that, now I'm 40, now I'm 50. We buy into that. Now, is your skin the same as when you're 20? No, it isn't. Is your muscle mass? No. Could it be freaking pretty good? It can. Mm-hmm. And so I think not creating a narrative And I've had to watch this because I'll be 50 in January, where all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm 50. Oh, I'm 50. I'm 50. It's like, okay, idiot. Like, we got that. Now, why is that front and center? Like, get on with it. So I think it's also like, what's not in your control, what are you going to do? It's not in your control. You know, like 1% less body, muscle each year. But by the way, you can still manage that. Oh, I have wrinkles. Yep, you do. That stuff, let it go. All the stuff you can be in charge of, your sleep, your stress, your sense of joy or peace, and your overall self-care. Hey, alcohol, by the way, not great. Cigarettes, not good. Medication that if you don't need it, better to see what things you could eliminate. So what are the things that you're in charge of that you can support? But you can't be like, oh, I really want to be healthy. And then you're like drinking continuously and going to bed late. It's like, okay, well, it doesn't matter how much iron you bang through time. It's not going to work. So, and real food, listen, whether people are vegetarian or they eat animal protein, it's like as close to the source as you can. And most of us are overeating because we're dehydrated or bored or stressed out. And if we can manage that a little bit, I think that helps. But it has to first start with that it's important.
Yeah.
Not, oh, I really want to get in shape. That's rhetoric. It's like, okay, well, what's your strategy? Let's go back to that. What is your real strategy? How are you going to follow that? How are you going to execute that? Who's going to help you? Maybe you need help. We all need help. Call somebody, say, you got to meet me at 7. We're going to go do this. Okay, great. And then give yourself a break. Like, love yourself, because it's so easy to see all that it is not, instead of seeing, and you know this having gone through an illness with your wife, what is good.
Mm-hmm.
And look at that and be reminded of that and be aware of what you want to work on, but what is good also.
Yeah, I had a really good friend of mine who was a natural, homeopathic doctor who said, the key is to look at your life and say, where do you have dis-ease? Where do you have a state of wellness? And where do you have a state of greatness? And be honest about where you have dis-ease. And, so just like that's always in the back of my mind. And I look at it like with every relationship, with my physical life, my spiritual life, my emotional life. Like, do I have some dis-ease right now with my 20-year-old son? Like, how do I get it back to wellness? And what I want is greatness all the time, right? So, I mean, it sounds like we're on a very similar page. What do you say to the person that just says, Gabby, but you don't understand, like, I'm so busy, or look, like I hear this all the time. Everyone in my family is overweight. Everybody in my family has a bad back. Everybody in my family has chronic hoobie-doobie. Yeah. And therefore, I have hoobie-doobie, and we talk about hoobie-doobie when we're together all the time.
Well, the problem is, I always say, we actually didn't inherit their genetics. We inherited the lifestyle, right? So I think it's really getting people to say, what story am I telling? And do I have the wherewithal to figure out a way to change this story and this narrative? And I'm going to love my family. They're my people. But I actually have to choose to do it a different way. Yeah. And also, as harsh as this is, and this is the good thing about like when you're a kid and like your parents split, you can be a little harsher. Yeah. Is you go, oh, I'm actually, if you're not in support of my quest, I'm actually going to also put you in a place that makes me comfortable. Because the problem is we owe everybody and we have all this, obligation and these things. But what we have to ask ourselves is, every person, all the books we're reading, all the things we're doing, time we're spending, it actually needs to be supporting us. And if it's not, then I need to figure out a way to love them and make them know that they're loved and appreciated, but not at the cost of myself. And so what I say to people, it isn't even about saying, oh, that's right or wrong or good or bad. Does this situation make me feel comfortable or uncomfortable? Is this moving towards the thing I feel inside that I want so much, that I know is good for me? And just keep looking, is this friendship making me feel uncomfortable or comfortable? And be honest. And by the way, it's harsh, but it's your life and you're responsible for that. And so if something isn't the way you want it, then you have to actually make it that way. And people might say, oh, you're doing this. I mean, talk to people who stop drinking alcohol. See what happens. They lose a lot of friends. and people will say things to them, and there's a lot going on. So I think people have to realize their value system, and when they say they're so busy, it's like, okay, well, what can give? If your health is not a priority, then what are you so busy doing that is more important than your health? I mean, your children are, and maybe, and I understand we have to survive, we have to work, but at the end of the day, and when people talk about being rich, why is that not coveted as one of the greatest assets that we could ever strive for, which is overall good health? And the problem is we covet large houses and clean cars and all these things. And it's like, yeah, okay, but we're like, this is one of the big ones.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you. Switch gears with me again. You guys created this app, this movement, this training. Shed some, like, maybe for the person that hasn't downloaded it already.
Sure.
Tell us about the app. Tell us about what they can expect. Like, I've been digging into it, and I love the breathing stuff. I'm now looking at the pool at my club that I go to because I got rid of my pool. Like, I'm now thinking about, are they going to be cool if I start putting weights inside the pool? And
Yeah.
I'll probably just not ask them because that's just who I am. But so maybe just like what is the backstory on the company? What could somebody expect? Like, just shed some light on the product.
Well, XPT really was, a genuine combination of our lifestyle training, some of the elements. So it's move, breathe, and recover, because movement is a natural. We're animals. We're meant to move around. Doesn't mean, for people listening, you don't have to kill yourself.
No.
And now breathing is the pivotal one, because what I appreciate so much about breathing, and that's why it's the first thing we launched in the app, is you can do it anywhere. And it is the most essential elements of life, right? We can go without water for a long time. We can go out without food for 30 days, water 3 days, and breathing 3 minutes, right? Mm-hmm. So, talking about order of priority, and most of us about 200 years ago, we sort of stopped breathing correctly. I don't know if it was, now we're sitting and our ribs are, we have no room for our lungs as freely as we used to when we're either, walking more or things like that. So I like that. And then recovery, what does that mean? It doesn't mean I took the day off and I sat on the couch. There are things we can do to participate in our recovery. So mobilization, if people can go into heat, or, things to support the recovery, not just not do anything. And so those were elements, and this is stuff that Laird and I were doing for 10, 12 years. The pool is a little different. The pool was created where Laird sort of wanted to have a deeper relationship with performance in water, with that air, things like that. But then what we started to learn is, as aging athletes, you can be ballistic and dynamic without pounding your joints. And it was a way to train very, very hard and not be broken. And the pool will be something that is a little more special and specific, and you have to be with somebody who's so highly qualified to teach it. Because when you're dealing with an environment where there's no air, people have inherent fear. It's a real thing. And now you're going to give them dumbbells, right? However, I would say it's the most cathartic training because, again, how do you get to really work so hard at such a high level? And when you're done, you don't feel compressed and smashed. Mm-hmm. And what's the most fascinating thing about the water training is this. Sometimes the difference between making it and not making it is simply my ability to relax. And so I can be like, no, I'm relaxed. It's like, are you? Because the water will tell you right away, because you're burning air, because you're stressed out. Mm-hmm. Versus I could go there and back and not take a breath, or go there 4 times or whatever. And the only difference was my ability to downregulate and get myself to relax. And for me, all training needs to be interpreted into real life. So, you're in the meeting, or you're getting ready for a meeting, or your kids walk in and you want to, kill somebody. And in that moment is an opportunity to go, can I get myself to get a grip here before I open my mouth or do anything or say anything? And so the important thing also about XPT is everything needs to translate. This is not about the size of your biceps. This is to make you a more functional, optimum organism. Whether you're doing a business, you're a parent, whatever it is, just to be your optimal self. So we, like I said, crash test dummied it for a long time. And now we're fortunate because there's sort of a system in place. And it's sort of like if people have access to it, great. If they can pluck off certain parts, I would always say the breathing is so important, because if we learn how to breathe correctly, it's a tool we can use in our life for our health and our well-being.
Mm-hmm. When you look at like the meditation movement, the meditation app movement, that's really exploded in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the first things that, like, when I dug into it, just because of mutual friends that, you know, that shared this. And by the way, for the people that are listening, a really good friend of mine who's been on the Tom Ferry show before, Ken Carey, who's like an infomercial savant. I was with him 2 weeks ago and he's like, oh my God, I was just in the pool with like Laird Howard and Gabby Reece, and I'm doing this training, and I had never heard of it before, right? Mm-hmm. But I was instantly fascinated. But then he talked about recovery. And I think the things that people miss, like everybody gets like, okay, I want to train hard, but not a lot of people talk about the importance of getting cold, getting hot, breathing, relaxing, the recovery side. So I think, you know, when I downloaded the app, like I kind of immediately was moved to go that direction, right? Especially the breathing stuff, because we can do it. Well, first of all, we do it all the time.
Yes.
But to actually do intentional breathing for the people that are listening, like before you go on an appointment, get calm. When you come out of the appointment and your adrenaline's rushing because you just got a signed contract and you're, right? Like breathe, slow down. By the way, your husband has just popped through the door for the second time there. It's just completely hysterical. I love it. So Gabby, you can download the app, iOS, Android.
Actually, I heard through the grapevine it isn't Android, so I'm going to apologize ahead. But I think the thing too is even for sleeping, you know, to downregulate prior to sleep. Let's say you have a big thing you're taking on, it teaches you how to upregulate and warm up and kind of be like, I'm ready. Yeah. So I think it's, again, for me, the breath is your tool to utilize in any way needed in whichever circumstance. And I think that's so important. And I want to be really clear. When I talk about being healthy or fit, yes, okay, I want to be a certain type, you know, window of body fat and strength. And I like it if my physique, you know, looks organized and toned. But what I've learned from all these years of training is if you can't manage yourself, more times than not, we're human, we blow it, it happens.
Yeah.
Then we're sort of really missing a lot of the point. And training is just a way, or eating healthier or breathing. These are just ways to get us into more fertile ground to manage ourselves and our relationships and our responses and things like that. So I think it's really important for people to realize, yes, I come from a sports background, but that for me, the notion of being well, it's a complete picture.
Yeah. My tribe has heard me say 100, if not 1,000 times, take your meds. And they all like look at me and go, and I'm like, meditate, exercise, diet, and sleep. And somehow I got to put E now into that. Maybe it's like, you know, maybe you just say beds, you know.
It's all part of meditating. It's all good.
Yeah. So Gabby, this has been amazing. I obviously, like, if people don't have access to a pool, like, is this going to become something that I could go to some gym and I can go and get training? Are you guys certifying people across the world? Like, help me understand that side too.
Yeah, so eventually they are going to do certs. The pool will be the hardest thing for people to get certified in. But they'll, like, XPT is looking to sort of do these, you know, boxes where people could, you know, do some heat, do some mobility, do some ice, do breathing classes. And then there will definitely be specific locations for the pool. But again, that's just something we have to calibrate and be super responsible.
Yeah.
And by the way, as a side note, Ken Carey is a stud. Just so you know, because, you know, I have a lot of military guys and athletes and stuff. And I always say in about 7 minutes, I could tell who you'd want to be in a foxhole with, because who freaks out, who's like, can process information, all these things. Ken Carey did some drills that showed his real mental toughness.
Yeah. He actually,
legit.
Yeah. He's going to listen to this and he's going to say, thank you very much. And then he's going to say, in fairness, He said, there was no way that I was going to not follow through. He goes, I looked around and saw these Navy SEALs and all these rock stars, and like, you know, his chest got
Oh
puffed.
yeah,
He's a total stud.
he is, for real, because it's at that point it stops being physical and it is the mental, and that's what people have to always be reminded, that our spirit and our mind, you know, I feel like those are the harder things to get in check and to be better. And that's why I'm like, okay, I'll keep my body dialed because that's sort of the straightforward part. And then I can try to keep tackling my mind and my emotions and things like that. So.
Love it. Love it. You are such a blessing. This has been really fun.
Well, thank you. You know, listen, I really appreciate when people, you know, when they choose to be entrepreneurs. I know how challenging that is. And I also know how rewarding it is. But I feel like in this life, it's a really creative way to approach it, even though, you know, you do kind of get more lickings in a different way.
Yeah.
But that makes it pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. So as we wrap up, obviously they should go check out only on iOS right now, the X app.
Yep.
Strongly recommended for my tribe. Check it out. What else? What else should they be doing?
I'm actually launching my podcast in about 10 days. I used to do one with a gentleman named Neil Strauss called The Truth Barrel. And so now I'm doing one by myself, which is going to be interesting for me. So I'm working on that. And yeah, but I would encourage people just to check out the app because it's something that they could really utilize. And once they're taught, it's sort of like, we're always updating it and have new programs, but really it's about giving them the power to go, oh, I know how I'm feeling. I know what I need to do right now.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I can't wait to check out the podcast. That should be super great. By the way, I noticed your anxiety just on your face when you said that. You might want to check out your anxious breathing app on XPT.
Well, listen, nobody's that interesting is what I say. Like, you know.
Yeah, I'm with you. Well, listen, you, my dear, you are pretty damn interesting. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. For all my friends out there, make sure you share this with the faces and the back ends and the entrepreneurs and the spouses and the kids that you know that should listen to this message, because Gabby Reece has got it going on. She is the real deal.
Yes, with lots of lessons ahead of me, by the way.
But that's the whole game. That's the whole all right. Well, thank you so much. And for all my friends out there listening and watching, we appreciate you always. And we'll talk to you on the next week podcast.